Chapter 1. Essential Hand Tools and Layout. The block plane, the edge tamer, a compact, heavy block of cast iron and brass. Held in one hand, its razor-sharp steel blade is perfectly angled to shave microscopic paper-thin ribbons of wood off the ends of boards, leaving a glassy, flawless finish. Jack plane, the board flattener. A massive, two-handed iron plane measuring over 14 inches long. Before power tools existed, cabinet makers used the sheer weight and long sole of this heavy tool to manually aggressively scrub and flatten warped, rough lumber into perfectly straight, usable boards. Bevel-Edge Chisel, the precision slicer. A slender, high-carbon steel blade set into a dense wooden or composite handle. Featuring finely tapered edges on the sides, it allows the woodworker to reach deep into tight corners and cleanly slice away waste material to create perfectly interlocking joints. Mortise Chisel, the structural punch. Unlike the delicate bevel chisel, this is a massive, thick, rectangular block of steel. Designed to take a brutal beating from a heavy mallet, it is driven deep into solid wood to chop out the deep, square holes required for heavy furniture joints. Japanese pole saw, the ryoba, a massive shift from Western tools. Featuring a long bamboo handle and a terrifyingly thin steel blade, it cuts exclusively on the pole stroke, putting the thin metal under tension to deliver a flawlessly straight, impossibly thin cut with very little effort. Western Tenon Saw, the rigid cutter. A heavy, rectangular handsaw featuring a thick brass or steel spine running across the top. That heavy spine completely prevents the blade from flexing, allowing the woodworker to push the saw through hard oak and lock in perfectly straight, 90-degree structural cuts. Coping saw, the curve carver. A tall, D-shaped metal frame holding an incredibly thin, fragile wire blade under high tension. Because the blade is so narrow, you can spin it completely around while actively sawing, allowing you to easily cut complex, tight curves and intricate shapes out of solid wood panels. Wooden mallet, the blunt persuader. A large, heavy block of dense hardwood mounted to a handle. Unlike a steel hammer that would instantly shatter a wooden chisel handle, this massive wooden head delivers a heavy, dead blow, safely driving steel blades deep into the wood without destroying your other tools. Marking gauge, the permanent scribe. A wooden or brass beam featuring an adjustable sliding fence and a tiny razor-sharp steel pin. Instead of using a blurry pencil, the woodworker drags this fence along the edge of the board, allowing the pin to physically slice a permanent, perfectly parallel line directly into the wood fibers. Sliding T-Bevel, the angle duplicator. A heavy brass or wooden handle housing a slotted, movable steel blade. It does not actually measure degrees. Instead, you lock the blade to physically capture any strange or complex angle on a piece of furniture and instantly transfer that exact angle to your saw for a perfect cut. Combination square, the ultimate reference. A heavy cast iron head that slides along a grooved, hardened steel ruler. Locked at exactly 90 or 45 degrees, this perfectly machined tool is the absolute truth in the workshop, used to constantly check if the wood is perfectly flat, straight, and true. Cabinetmaker's screwdriver, the torque handle. A traditional flathead featuring a heavily flattened, oval-shaped wooden handle. While a modern round handle simply slips in your grip, this wide, flat wooden shape allows the craftsman to apply massive amounts of rotational torque by hand to drive heavy brass screws into solid oak. Spokeshave, the curve smoother. A small, specialized iron plane featuring two distinct handles flanking a tiny blade.
Originally used to carve round spokes for wooden wagon wheels, today it is pulled toward the craftsman to flawlessly sculpt complex curves, chair legs, and arched edges with incredible control. Card scraper, the finishing secret. A completely flat, simple rectangle of spring steel. It looks like a piece of scrap metal, but when a microscopic burr is rolled onto its edge, this tiny sheet of steel scrapes away wood faster and smoother than sandpaper, leaving a glass-like finish on wild wood grain. Marking knife, the layout scalpel. A small wooden handle holding a terrifyingly sharp, spear-pointed steel blade. In high-end joinery, pencil lines are far too thick and inaccurate. The craftsman uses this knife to sever the top wood fibers, creating a perfect physical trench that forces the chisel into the exact correct position. The router plane, the depth leveler. Looking like an iron bat with two wooden ears, this strange hand tool holds an L-shaped blade completely flat, allowing craftsmen to manually shave the bottoms of grooves and hinges to an identical, mathematically perfect depth. Shoulder plane, the joint perfecter. An incredibly slender, tall block of polished steel or brass. Unlike standard planes, its blade extends across the absolute full width of the body. This allows it to sneak perfectly into the sharp 90-degree inside corners of a tenon, shaving off microscopic dust to make joints fit together like glass. Drawknife, the bark stripper. A long, terrifyingly sharp exposed steel blade flanked by two wooden handles. Held with both hands and aggressively pulled directly toward the chest, it is used to violently strip bark off raw logs or rapidly sculpt heavy square timber into round chair legs. Winding sticks, the twist detectors. Two perfectly straight, contrasting pieces of wood. Before a board can be flattened, a woodworker places one stick at each end, drops their eye level, and simply looks across them. If the back stick tilts even a millimeter out of parallel, the board is permanently twisted. Holdfast, the blacksmith's clamp. A solid L-shaped piece of heavy forged iron. Dropped loosely into a hole in the workbench, the woodworker simply smashes the top with a heavy mallet. The iron forcefully wedges itself into the wood, instantly locking down heavy timber with thousands of pounds of pressure. Shooting board, the 90-degree jig. A custom-built wooden platform featuring a raised track and an absolutely perfect perpendicular fence. Instead of trusting a shaky hand, the craftsman lays their hand plane completely on its side, sliding it down the track to effortlessly shave end grain to a flawless, microscopic 90 degrees. Moxon Vise, the twin screw grip. A heavy, portable wooden vise featuring two massive threaded screws and wooden hand wheels. Because it sits directly on top of the workbench, it raises the wood up to chest level, saving the woodworker's back while clamping massive wide boards perfectly flat for complex joinery. Burnisher, the burr creator. A seemingly simple, completely smooth rod of hyper-hardened steel attached to a wooden handle. It does not cut wood. Instead, it is forcefully dragged across the edge of a card scraper to physically bend and crush the steel molecules into a microscopic razor-sharp hook. Hide glue pot, the ancient adhesive. A double boiler made of heavy copper or cast iron. Long before modern yellow wood glue existed, craftsmen melted animal collagen in this heated water bath. It cools into a glass-hard bond, yet can instantly be reversed hundreds of years later just by applying steam. Pinch dog, the invisible clamp. A small, heavy steel staple featuring aggressively tapered inside legs. When working on massive tabletops that are too wide for standard clamps, you hammer this tiny piece of steel directly across the seam. The tapered legs forcefully pull the two boards together with incredible crushing power. Dovetail Marker, the angle guide. A small, precision-milled block of solid brass or aluminum. Featuring precise 1:6 or 1:8 slope ratios, it is laid over the edge of a board to guide the knife marking, ensuring every single dovetail pin is cut at the exact same mathematical angle. Threat saw, the waste remover. Similar to a coping saw, but featuring a massively deep U-shaped metal throat. When chopping out complex dovetails, this extreme depth allows the woodworker to turn the saw entirely sideways inside the cut, effortlessly slicing away the waste wood hidden deep between the pins. Plow Plane, the track creator. A highly complex wooden or iron plane featuring extending arms and an adjustable fence. Instead of flattening a board, this specialized tool holds a very narrow iron blade, cutting long, perfect, continuous square grooves down the length of a board to hold drawer bottoms or cabinet panels. Story stick, the tape measure killer. A completely blank, simple strip of scrap wood. Tape measures cause mathematical errors. Master cabinet makers physically mark the exact width, depth, and height of their furniture directly onto this stick. It becomes a perfect, error-free physical master template for the entire build. Cabinet scraper plane, the tear-out silencer. Looking like a standard iron plane, but hiding a secret. It holds a thick steel card scraper bowed under extreme tension. It is specifically designed to tackle the wildest, most difficult, intertwining wood grains on Earth without causing a single splinter of tear-out.
The cabinet table saw, the workshop heart. A massive cast iron flat top housing a completely enclosed heavy-duty motor. It is the absolute center of the shop, spinning a 10-inch steel blade at terrifying speeds to perfectly rip massive sheets of plywood and thick hardwood down to their final dimensions. Wood jointer, the face flattener. A long, heavy iron bed split into two perfectly parallel tables. Hidden in the middle is a spinning cutter head. The woodworker pushes a warped, twisted board across the blades, violently shaving away the high spots until one entire face of the wood is mathematically, flawlessly flat. Thickness planer, the sizing machine. A loud, heavy box containing automated rubber feed rollers and a massive spinning blade. Once a board has one perfectly flat face from the jointer, it is fed through this machine, which aggressively shaves the opposite side, ensuring the board is completely parallel and reaches the exact required thickness. Bandsaw, the continuous slicer. A towering metal frame housing two massive rubber-coated wheels. Instead of a spinning circle, it drives a continuous flexible ribbon of razor-sharp steel teeth vertically through the wood, allowing craftsmen to safely cut incredibly thick lumber or sculpt tight, sweeping curves. Drill press, the vertical borer. A heavy iron pillar supporting a motorized head and a rotating chuck. Hand drills wobble and wander, but this massive machine locks the drill bit into a flawless vertical axis, using a mechanical lever to effortlessly plunge huge holes perfectly straight down into dense wood. Wood lathe, the rotational sculptor. A long, horizontal bed that clamps a block of wood between two spinning steel points. Instead of the blade moving, the massive motor spins the wood itself at thousands of RPMs, while the craftsman carefully holds a sharp chisel against the blur to carve perfect bowls, spindles, and chair legs. Plunge Router, the high-speed carver. A heavy two-handed motorized pod that houses an incredibly fast-spinning collet. Running at over 20,000 RPMs, the craftsman manually plunges this screaming tool directly down into the center of a board to violently hollow out complex geometric shapes, signs, and deep joinery grooves. Domino Joiner, the floating tenon machine. A hyper-expensive, specialized German power tool. It physically oscillates a spinning drill bit side to side, plunging perfect, uniform oval slots into two separate boards. You insert a wooden domino into the slots with glue, creating a massively strong, instantly perfect hidden joint. Biscuit Joiner, the alignment slicer.
A compact power tool housing a tiny retractable circular saw blade. Pressed against the edge of a board, it forcefully plunges a half-moon-shaped slice into the wood. Wooden football-shaped biscuits are glued into these slots, swelling up with moisture to lock giant tabletop panels perfectly flush. Tack Saw, the portable panel breaker. A highly specialized circular saw that locks perfectly onto a long extruded aluminum rail. Instead of wrestling giant, heavy sheets of plywood onto a table saw, you drop this track directly on top of the wood. The saw glides flawlessly down the rail, delivering an incredibly straight, splinter-free cut. Compound miter saw, the cross-cut king. A heavy circular saw blade mounted to a swinging, rotating mechanical arm. Locked into highly specific detents, you simply pull the screaming blade down to instantly chop through thick lumber at mathematically perfect 45 or 90-degree angles for flawless picture frames and trim. Hollow Chisel Mortiser, the square hole driller. A strange, heavy cast iron press. Standard drill bits only make round holes. This bizarre machine features a spinning drill bit hidden completely inside a square, razor-sharp steel chisel. It physically crushes its way through the wood to plunge perfectly square holes. Scroll Saw, the detail machine. A long, flat table housing a microscopic, vertically reciprocating blade. Moving up and down hundreds of times a minute, it is used almost like a sewing machine to effortlessly cut out impossibly delicate, intricate fretwork and puzzle piece designs from thin wooden boards. Drum Sander, the automated smoother. A heavy conveyor belt-fed machine housing a massive spinning aluminum drum wrapped in sandpaper. When a board is too wild or figured for a blade to cut without tearing, this brutal machine simply grinds it down, perfectly flattening and sanding wide tabletop panels in a single pass. Cyclone Dust Collector, the shop lungs. A towering metal funnel attached to a massive industrial motor vacuum. Because microscopic wood dust causes serious, permanent lung damage, this high-velocity system uses cyclonic suction to aggressively rip thousands of cubic feet of sawdust directly out of the machines before it ever hits the air.
The F-style clamp, the third hand, featuring a long steel bar and a sliding lower jaw. It slides up quickly to meet the wood, and a heavy wooden or plastic handle is twisted to apply localized, high-pressure clamping force exactly where the woodworker needs it. Parallel clamp, the Cabinetmaker's vise. A massive, incredibly heavy clamp featuring two giant rectangular resin jaws on a thick steel rail. Unlike standard clamps that pivot and bow, these massive jaws stay perfectly parallel under extreme pressure, guaranteeing that heavy cabinet boxes and drawers are glued together flawlessly square. Pipe clamp, the infinite reach. A set of cast iron jaws screwed directly onto a standard piece of black iron plumbing pipe. Because the pipe is sold separately, woodworkers can screw these jaws onto a 2-foot pipe for small jobs, or a massive 10-foot pipe to crush gigantic dining table panels together. Wooden hand screw clamp, the angled grip. A completely wooden clamp featuring two thick maple jaws connected by two threaded steel or wooden rods. Because the two screws operate independently, the jaws can actually pivot off-center, allowing craftsmen to securely clamp strange, tapered, or completely uneven shapes. Band clamp, the strap lock. A heavy-duty nylon woven strap attached to a ratcheting tension mechanism. Normal clamps only push in straight lines. You wrap this strap completely around circular tables, octagons, or complex chairs, ratcheting in tight to pull every single joint together simultaneously from the outside in. Spring clamp, the quick pinch. Looking like a giant heavy-duty clothespin with rubber-coated tips. Powered by a thick coiled steel spring, it is squeezed open with one hand and instantly released to hold small, delicate parts together or temporarily pin templates to a workpiece before routing. Corner clamp, the 90-degree locker. An L-shaped aluminum or steel jig featuring 2 perpendicular screws. Making picture frames or perfectly square boxes is notoriously difficult. This tool physically captures the 2 pieces of wood, locking them exactly at 90 degrees so you can safely drive a nail or screw. C-clamp, the brute force. A solid U-shaped forging of thick cast iron holding a heavy threaded bolt. It is slow to adjust and offers 0 finesse. However, because the frame is solid iron, it will never flex, allowing you to apply thousands of pounds of crushing torque to a single microscopic point. Toggle clamp, the jig lockdown. A mechanical metal linkage that bolts directly onto a wooden sled or fixture. Used for repetitive cuts on a table saw, you throw the rubberized lever down and a linkage snaps past its center point, instantly locking the wood onto the jig with massive, unyielding pressure. Wood glue, the permanent bind. Yellow PVA glue housed in a plastic squeeze bottle. While screws can loosen over time, when this liquid polymer soaks into the wood fibers and dries under clamping pressure, it creates a chemical bind that is actually stronger than the solid wood itself. Brad nailer, the pneumatic pinner. An air-powered gun connected to a high-pressure hose. Instead of using a hammer, you pull the trigger to violently fire a microscopic 18-gauge wire nail perfectly flush into the wood, acting as an invisible internal clamp while the glue dries. Random orbital sander, the swirl killer. A handheld electric motor spinning a circular pad of sandpaper. Standard sanders leave ugly circular scratches in the wood. This machine spins the pad while simultaneously throwing in random tiny ellipses, guaranteeing a flawlessly smooth surface with 0 visible scratch marks. Sanding block, the manual flattener. A perfectly flat block of rubber, cork, or hardwood wrapped in standard sandpaper. Power sanders are fast, but their soft pads can accidentally round over crisp, sharp edges. The rigid backing of a manual block forces the sandpaper to cut completely flat, preserving perfect geometry. Tack Cloth, the dust magnet. A loosely woven piece of cheesecloth saturated in a specialized sticky beeswax or resin. Immediately before applying the final oil of varnish, you gently wipe this incredibly sticky rag across the wood to capture and trap microscopic dust particles that a vacuum leaves behind. Finishing oil, the grain popper. Tongue oil, linseed oil, or specialized Danish blends, applied with a rag as the absolute final step. It soaks deep into the thirsty wood fibers, suddenly illuminating the hidden 3-dimensional grain and permanently protecting the furniture from moisture and decay.
The jigsaw, the curve cutter. A handheld electric saw with a tiny vertical blade that rapidly punches up and down. Resting on a flat metal shoe, it allows the woodworker to easily steer the blade through solid wood to freehand complex curves and sweeping arcs. Impact driver, the screw sinker. Looking like a standard drill, but housing a violent internal anvil mechanism. When driving a long, heavy screw into dense oak, it automatically begins striking the rotational shaft with rapid concussive blows, driving the metal deep into the wood without stripping the screw head or twisting your wrists. Pocket hole jig, the hidden fastener. A blue plastic or aluminum block featuring sharply angled metal drill guides. Clamped tightly to the edge of a board, it forces a specialized drill bit to bore a perfect 15-degree angled tunnel, allowing you to drive a screw completely across a joint to pull 2 boards tightly together from the inside. Forstner Bit, the flat-bottom borer. A heavy cylindrical drill bit featuring a sharp center spur and a massive continuous cutting rim. Unlike standard twist drills that leave a messy cone-shaped hole, this specialized bit shaves the wood perfectly flat, creating a flawless, smooth-bottomed crater required for mounting concealed cabinet hinges. Auger Bit, the deep driller. A long, terrifying-looking drill bit wrapped in a deep steel spiral. Featuring a threaded screw tip, it literally pulls itself deep into massive, heavy timbers, while the deep flutes act like a continuous conveyor belt to aggressively rip the wood chips up and out of the massive hole. Flush trim bit, the template follower.
A steel router bit fitted with sharp tungsten carbide blades and a tiny spinning ball bearing. The bearing rides smoothly against a master wooden template, guiding the spinning razor blades to completely duplicate the shape, carving the rough wood below to absolutely perfectly match the template above. Dado blade stack, the trench digger. Not just one blade, but a massive stack of heavy steel table saw blades bolted together. By adding or removing the inner chipping blades, you can dial in the exact perfect width needed to chew a massive flat-bottom trench through a board in a single terrifying pass. Rip blade, the linear slicer. A table saw blade featuring a low number of massive, aggressive carbide teeth with deep gullets between them. It is designed exclusively for cutting perfectly parallel to the wood grain. The deep valleys act like tiny shovels, rapidly scooping out massive ribbons of sawdust before the blade can overheat and burn the wood. Bench grinder, the metal shaper. A heavy dual-sided motor bolted directly to the workbench, spinning two massive heavy stone wheels at thousands of RPMs. The woodworker carefully presses their dull, chipped chisels and plane blades against the grinding stone, showering the shop in sparks to quickly re-establish a sharp bevel. Whetstone, the razor maker. A heavy rectangular block of synthetic waterstone or natural Arkansas stone. Covered in water to float away the microscopic steel shavings, the craftsman spends hours manually rubbing their blades across this abrasive block, polishing the dull edge until it reaches a terrifying mirror-like sharpness. Leather strop, the ultimate edge. A thick strip of raw cowhide leather glued perfectly flat to a piece of wood. Saturated in microscopic green polishing compound, this is the absolute final step. The blade is dragged backward across the leather, gently stropping away the microscopic burr to leave an edge sharp enough to shave with. Angle grinder with carving disc, the power sculptor. A loud handheld motor spinning a terrifying disc covered in chainsaw teeth. While normally used for cutting metal, sculptors and bowl makers use this brutal tool to violently hog away massive amounts of solid wood in seconds, freehand sculpting giant organic curves. Featherboard, the safety fingers. A plastic or wooden block featuring dozens of highly flexible, angled fingers. Locked directly into the table saw's metal slot, these flexible fingers apply constant, unyielding pressure against the side of the wood, pressing it safely against the fence and physically preventing the blade from violently kicking the board back at you. Push stick, the finger saver. A highly specialized, notched stick made of plastic or scrap wood. When pushing a board through the table saw, you never let your fleshy hands get within 6 inches of the spinning carbide. This tool physically bridges the gap, allowing you to push the wood safely past the blade from a distance. Moisture meter, the lumber interrogator. A small digital device featuring 2 aggressively sharp steel pins. Before a master craftsman ever cuts a piece of expensive lumber, they physically stab these pins deep into the grain. The screen reads the exact internal water content, ensuring the wood is dry enough that it won't violently warp or crack after the furniture is built.
Air Filtration System, the invisible shield. A heavy metal box suspended directly from the workshop ceiling. While a cyclone collector grabs the heavy chips, this constantly pulls the ambient air through internal microfilters, silently scrubbing out the invisible cancer-causing dust that hangs suspended in the room. Half-face respirator, the lung armor. A heavy-duty silicone and rubber mask featuring dual bright pink particulate filters. Standard paper masks leak constantly. This creates a flawless, airtight seal against the woodworker's face, forcing every single breath through medical-grade HEPA filters when milling exotic, highly toxic woods. Bench dog, the table stop. A small, heavy cylinder of solid brass or wood featuring a flat face. Dropped perfectly into a grid of pre-drilled holes on the workbench, it acts as an immovable backstop. You push your board against it, allowing you to aggressively hand-plane the wood without it sliding completely off the table. Front vise,
The iron grip. A massive cast iron and steel mechanism bolted directly underneath the front edge of the workbench. Featuring a heavy wooden handle and a quick-release trigger, you spin the massive steel-threaded screw to forcefully crush your lumber against the side of the table, locking it in place for intricate saw cuts. The Roubo Workbench, the ultimate tool. A gargantuan, incredibly heavy table built entirely from solid, thick hardwood. It is not just a desk, weighing hundreds of pounds to completely absorb violent chisel blows and perfectly flattened to act as a master reference surface. This bench is the foundation that makes every other tool in the shop function.